90s anime never ceases to amaze, and Cowboy Bebop is a prime example. Directed by the legendary Shinichirou Watanabe, this classic not only lives up to, but often surpasses today's standards. With only one season of 26 episodes and a movie, Cowboy Bebop is a gem from the 90s. Before we jump in, let's set some background for a better understanding. Spike Spiegel, the main character, is your run-of-the-mill bounty hunter traveling through space on his ship called Bebop. Joining him is Faye Valentine, a stunning woman who looks younger than she is and was once a wanted criminal. There's also Jet Black, a tough ex-cop who balances out Spike's antics. And Radical Edward, an emo teenage hacker with a knack for getting into trouble. And of course, you can't forget Ein, the adorable dog with more riz than the main character. The story opens up with flashbacks of Spike's past, where he goes into a church with a gun disguised in a bouquet and with some grenades. He kills everyone in the church while laughing like a maniac. In the present day, the Bebop cruises through hyperspace near Mars. Jet, in a classic what's for dinner sitcom moment, serves up his specialty, bell peppers and beef. Spike, fresh from martial arts practice, asks for the beef. Jet, stone-faced, reminds Spike that his reckless antics cost them the entire bounty from their last job, leading to a zero balance in their Wulong Bank. Jet briefs Spike about their next target, Asimov Solensen, a small fry with a big price tag of 2.5 million Wulongs. Spike, channeling his wannabe chakra, rants about going after such a small bounty, while Jet continues and tells him Asimov's last seen location, an asteroid named Tijuana. Spike, with a loud stomach growl, finally boards as he wants to eat Tijuana's carnitas, which are seemingly tasty enough to make someone fly to the moon. Arriving at Tijuana, Jet gathers intel with Spike in the swordfish. They consult the mystical laughing bull. Bull tells Spike about a red-eyed coyote and the woman leading him to his death. Foreshadowing anyone? Only time will tell. Spike, pulling a Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, quips that he's already died once. Bull blesses him as Spike heads off to find Asimov. At the El Rey bar, Asimov and his girlfriend Katerina mix drinks and mayhem. Asimov, on Bloody Eye, a forbidden performance-enhancing potion, turns the place into a bullet-ridden circus. Jet, investigating the aftermath, learns Asimov stole the Bloody Eye from his own syndicate. Meanwhile, Spike, on a pit stop, has an awkward bathroom encounter with Asimov, where the hunter fails to recognize the hunted. Spike leaves as he comments about not clogging the drain. Outside, Spike charms Katerina into sharing her food and dreams of Mars. When he reveals he is a bounty hunter, Asimov, in a jealous rage, nearly chokes him out. Spike swipes a vial of Bloody Eye during the scuffle. Katerina, dreaming of a better life, can't help but feel trapped. Jet arrives just in time to rescue Spike and suggests they abandon the chase. Spike stages a fake deal with Asimov, leading to a high-octane fight. Asimov, partially juiced on the Bloody Eye, loses to Spike's martial arts finesse. Syndicate goons crash the party, forcing Asimov and Katerina to flee. In the chaotic escape, Katerina's stash of red-eye vials is revealed, and she's shot. They hijack a zip craft, but with ISSP cruisers blocking their exit, Katerina shoots Asimov. As they approach the blockade, she's blown into space. A tragedy. Back on the Bebop, Spike, deep in thought, resumes his martial arts practice. Jet, like a sitcom dad, throws him a cigarette and announces dinner. You guessed it, bell peppers and beef. However, Spike knows that it's just another day in the life of a space cowboy. Later, a serial pet thief named Abdul Hakim unwraps his bandaged face after what looks like some DIY plastic surgery in a public bathroom. Just as a group of armed scientists corners him. Hakim goes full John Wick mode, knocks them out, and leaves with a hefty briefcase. Meanwhile, in hyperspace near Mars, Spike chills with Big Shot. a TV show for bounty hunters from where he learns about the bounty on Hakim. The outdated mugshot doesn't help, but the bounty does 8 million wulongs for capturing Hakim alive for stealing an important animal. Jet walks by as Spike's doctor buddy calls the Bebop, offering an updated picture of Hakim for a mere 280 wulongs, and mentions a suspicious briefcase, but he doesn't know what is inside it. On Mars, Hakim contacts someone via cell phone before heading to a juice bar. He gets distracted by an old man, allowing a young accomplice to swipe his suitcase and make a getaway. The Bebop lands on Mars, and Spike, confident as ever, sets off with his swordfish too. He visits a pawn shop where, after impressing the clerk with his Bruce Lee nunchuck knowledge, he gets directed to Animal Treasure. At Animal Treasure, the young thief tries to sell Hakim's suitcase contents to the store owner. Spike catches him at gunpoint, mistaking him for a post-surgery Hakim. They open the case to find a Pembroke Welsh Corgi puppy, later named Ein, worth just 2 wulongs. 2. Realizing his mistake, Spike heads out only to bump into the real Hakim outside. Hakim confronts the young thief and tries to grab Ein, but the puppy escapes. A gunshot draws Spike back and he sees Hakim. Scientists from the research facility spot Ein, igniting a high-speed chase. Hakim after Ein, and Spike along with the scientists after Hakim. Some sort of cycle of life, if you will. Ein reaches a bridge where Spike and Hakim face off. Spike reveals his bounty hunter status, and they engage in a fight until Ein jumps over the bridge onto a boat. They leap after him, but Ein lands on Spike's head while Hakim ends up in a barrel of crabs. Spike, drenched and crabless, holds onto Ein. Back on the Bebop, Jet outfits Ein with a tracking collar. Spike points at Ein as he is frustrated by his low value, and Ein bites him on the finger. They decide to use Ein as bait to lure Hakim. Spike, looking like a reluctant dog walker, roams Mars's streets while Jet tracks him. Meanwhile, the scientists fear the public exposure of their Datadog project. Back on the streets, Hakim contacts his buyer, but he postpones their meeting. An old man with a bird approaches him and claims that his pet bird, Pico, can find the things he seeks. Hakim becomes intrigued by his proposal. The scientists use a high-powered dog whistle that catches Ein's attention. Ein escapes Spike, joining the dog pack following the scientist's van. Hakim spots the van, steals a newlywed couple's car, and chases after Ein. He knocks over Spike, grabs Ein, and sprays him with a sleeping agent. Spike tracks Hakim to a causeway and tries to crash his car, but the scientist's van intervenes, harpooning Hakim. Ein wakes up, opens the van doors, and jumps out. Despite his disdain from critters, Spike saves Ein from falling into the water, landing just in time to see the harpooned Hakim and the scientists crash into an ISSP precinct. Big Shot reports on the crash, revealing that Ein is a Datadog from an illegal lab. The police arrest the scientists and Hakim, leaving Spike and Jet no bounty rewards. In the end, despite everything, Spike and Jet keep Ein, adding the troublesome dog who can act as a relief character in the future events. Faye Valentine strolls into a shop on Mars, but a gang of thugs quickly tracks her down. Little did they know, she pulls out her Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine gun as if she's starring in a Michael Bay action movie. Despite her badassery, they still capture her though. She is hauled off to Gordon, a criminal casino owner who's convinced she's the reincarnation of Poker Alice, a legendary gambler. Faye neither confirms nor denies, but agrees to help Gordon with a business deal to clear her debts. Meanwhile, Spike and Jet are down to their last 5,000 wulongs and head to Gordon's casino, Spiders from Mars, hoping for a quick cash infusion. Jet jokes that Spike's sharp eyes will get him kicked out if he wins too much. Spike sits at a blackjack table where Faye is the dealer. She's been briefed that a guy like Spike will sit, lose his money, and tip his last chip, the one Gordon wants. However, Spike, in a twist that looks more like a plot hole, keeps the chip and walks away. He bumps into his not-so-doppelganger and accidentally swaps the chips. Faye chases him down since she needs the chip, but Spike loudly accuses her of cheating. She runs away as the casino's thugs approach, and it takes a handful of them to finally subdue Spike. Meanwhile, Jet hits the jackpot, winning over 200,000 wulongs at the slots. Faye remotely summons her zipcraft, the Red Tail, and blows out a wall for a dramatic escape. Spike and Jet latch onto her ship, giving her a surprise ride. Gordon becomes enraged and finds out his man's chip is fake and delivers a monologue straight from a mystery visual novel before killing him. Back on the Bebop, Faye is handcuffed to the toilet and confronted by Spike and Jet. Ein, curious about Faye's scent, gets too close, and Spike jokes they'll sell her ship to recoup Jet's lost winnings. Faye suggests trading the chip to Gordon, but they dismiss her. She secretly contacts Gordon, tipping him off. Which is another hole in the plot if you ask me, but whatever. Later, watching Big Shot, Spike and Jet learn Faye's bounty is 6 million wulongs. Jet examines the chip, discovering a hidden computer chip inside. When Faye hears her bounty amount, she becomes disappointed as she was expecting more. She pleads not to be turned in, but they ignore her. Suddenly, Gordon's ship collides with the Bebop, and he demands the chip from them. However, after Jet and Spike have learned its significance, they deny him. Jet recounts a backstory involving a master decryption program, Cryptbreaker, encoded in the chip. Since they're always in dire need of money, Gordon offers them a whopping 30 million wulongs, and they agree. Understandable. Spike suits up and floats to Gordon's ship. After tossing the chip to his henchman, he suddenly takes out a gun to attack Spike. Spike channels his inner cowboy and maneuvers around space to disable the thug and finally kicks him away into space. Now this is Cowboy Bebop. Meanwhile, Faye uses a hairpin to escape from her cuffs and raids Bebop's kitchen to eat something, while Ein tries to stop her. After she's done eating, she blasts through the Bebop's hangar and takes off with the suitcase before Spike can catch her. As she zooms away, Gordon's ship fires at her, but she reverses the rockets, blowing Gordon's flight deck to smithereens. Spike returns to the Bebop with the now worthless poker chip, but he and Jet decide to use it to gamble at another casino, hoping for a better payout in their never-ending quest for wulongs. After escaping the Bebop, Faye runs out of fuel in her ship, the Red Tail, and drifts near Ganymede. She encounters a wrecked ship with a homing beacon and decides to investigate it without any precautions. Meanwhile, Spike and Jet order breakfast at a Ganymede spaceport restaurant as they track a bounty head named Morgan. To confirm their target, Jet uses a pair of computerized glasses, and the glasses show an accuracy of 94.2%, since if it was 100%, it either would have been a hack or just a show-off. Besides them, at the restaurant are the Space Warriors, eco-terrorists led by Twinkle Maria Murdoch. They confront Morgan, demanding his sea rat saute, and open fire with machine guns. Rat soup? A valid reason to open fire. They leave a canister that reveals a hologram and tune introducing their mission. Jet hides under a table and recalls Murdoch has a 25 million wulong bounty. Spike stops Murdoch at gunpoint, forcing her to surrender and ordering her followers to leave. Back on the Bebop, Jet learns the bounty on Murdoch has dropped after the Ganymede government negotiated with the Space Warriors, who threatened to release a virus if Murdoch does not return safely. Faye finds a man named Get in a life support pod on the wrecked ship, and he asks her to bring a case to the ISSP but dies before explaining the reason. Faye opens the case and finds the Space Warriors' virus container. Jet receives a message from Faye, out of fuel and hoping to flag down a passerby. Spike and Jet quietly listen to her plea until she realizes it's the Bebop. On the Bebop, Faye is handcuffed to a ladder while Jet investigates the bounty's cancellation. Spike rummages through her belongings and finds the gold object. Faye suggests giving it to the ISSB for a reward, but Spike fails to believe her. Jet contacts Bob, a friend of his in ISSB, who initially refuses to talk but eventually reveals Ganymede is threatened by a virus called monkey business, which mutates humans into monkeys, making a joke out of our traditional understanding of evolution. Spike continues inspecting the gold object. That annoys Murdoch until he shoots the shell without understanding that the shell is protecting the virus. Jet catches the inner casing and decides to let Murdoch go. Without a bounty, they airlock with the Space Warriors' ship and release Twinkle Maria Murdoch. Back in negotiations, the Chief Minister says they limited sea rat harvesting, but Murdoch wanted a prohibition. She demonstrates the virus's power by releasing it on Ganymede, using Harrison as a test subject. ISSB cruisers pursue the Space Warrior's ship, but it's a decoy that explodes. Murdoch broadcasts a live speech and Spike gets the chance to track their signal, leading him to hyperspace. The bounty on her is renewed, prompting the Bebop crew to chase them. Spike takes the Swordfish 2 into hyperspace as he destroys 2 of the missiles, but struggles with the third one. Let's see who's stronger, 2 explosive missiles capable of destroying buildings, or 1 charging man on a swordfish. Faye refuels in space and offers to help in return for 60% of the bounty. She engages the third missile, which breaks into a cluster of warheads. To escape, they need to go through the astral gate before it closes. The warheads spread everywhere, and the Space Warrior's ship slows down. Murdoch realizes Spike slipped the virus sample into her pocket, which breaks and infects the Space Warriors. Back on the Bebop, Faye consoles Spike and Jet on losing their bounty and tells them that they will make the big bucks on the next one. And with that, she becomes a member of the crew, and Spike and Jet just quietly acknowledge her self-invite. Mao Yenrai, capo of the Red Dragon Crime Syndicate, meets with Carlos of the White Tiger Crime Syndicate in his high-rise office to sign a truce agreement, aiming to end their bloody feud. After signing the deal, Carlos leaves with his entourage, but he leaves with a bang. Vicious, a menacing member of the Red Dragon Syndicate, barges in with his henchmen and kills everyone except Mao. Mao tells Vicious that his actions are useless, as he mentions that Spike's presence might have prevented this situation. But Vicious remains unfazed as he smiles and kills Mao with his signature sword. Jet and Spike discover a new 28 million Wulong bounty on Mao Yenrai, but his crime is unknown. Spike seems to know more than he speaks, and Jet questions him. Spike deflects his questions as if he is a Dark Souls player and asks Jet about his lost arm, but Jet doesn't respond, hinting at a complex past. Faye arrives from shopping and tries to join in their conversation, but they don't let her. Spike decides to follow some leads he digs up despite Jet's concerns and takes off in the Swordfish 2. Jet warns Spike over the communications that he will not be alone, but Spike, with the dog in him, is fine with that. Faye teases them about their spat. She reads the bounty details and follows a lead to an opera house by posing as Mao's date. However, she remains surprised by Mao's corpse and meets Vicious. Spike visits Annie, an old comrade from the Red Dragon days, who now runs a shop. There's an infamous theory suggesting that Spike and Annie were past lovers, but to this day it still remains unconfirmed. She's shocked to see him as she thinks he has been dead for the past 3 years. She informs him about Mao's fate and gives him a gun with bullets. Back on the Bebop, Spike gathers grenades and more guns, while Jet tells Spike that Faye is off following a lead and warns that Mao is already dead. However, Spike remains determined to settle an old score and presses on. Suddenly, Faye calls in and pleads for rescue from Vicious. Jet decides to leave her, but Spike fails to reason with him and goes to help her. Vicious is waiting for Spike at a cathedral. They exchange brief words before a gunfight breaks out between them. Spike rescues Faye and takes out the henchman as he fights his way to Vicious. They duel with guns and swords, and gradually both of them begin to bleed. As they fight, Vicious claims they share the same blood, but Spike says that he has bled away. Vicious, enraged, throws Spike through a stained glass window, but not before Spike tosses a grenade, causing a massive explosion. As Spike falls, memories flash before his eyes, fighting moments alongside Vicious and his tender moments with Julia. Fast forward 3 days and Spike wakes up in the Bebop by Faye's side as she hums a song. When Spike criticizes her off-key singing, Faye smacks him with a pillow and storms off. Spike dreams of being operated on by surgeons in a room filled with human organs and a floating fish. He awakens in a nightclub where a kid plays blues on a harmonica. A horrifying sight to wake up to. Meanwhile, Faye inspects the Bebop's refrigerator, finding only dog food. Ein waits by his dish, but Faye eats the dog food herself as she tells Ein to work for his food. Now that was cold. Jet joins Spike at the nightclub, where they discuss blues music and confirm their next target, a 3 million Wulong bounty head named Giraffe. Spike spots Giraffe and follows him outside, discovering he's tailing a kid himself from the stage. Giraffe enters a taxi with an old man in a wheelchair, and Spike continues to follow him carefully. Giraffe rushes into a hotel suit, demanding the old man, Zebra, to be returned. Suddenly, Giraffe crashes through the window and Spike manages to catch him. Giraffe, shot and dying, insists Spike help someone by giving Spike a ring and advises him not to be fooled by appearances. Back on the Bebop, Jet and Spike become desperate for money and decide to sell the ring. Faye tries to claim part of the reward, but both of them treat her like a side character of an average anime. Jet learns from Fatty River that Giraffe and Zebra were once leader of the self-defense volunteer squad, and that Wen, supposedly Zebra's son, is involved. Shockingly, they find an old newspaper article showing Wen has not aged in 30 years. Spike returns to the nightclub and follows Wen and Zebra to a warehouse. Wen confronts Spike, revealing his immortality due to an accident during the Astral Gate explosion, which stopped his aging. Spike and Wen shoot each other and Spike manages to injure Wen. He tries to escape, but Spike returns to the Bebop with Zebra, who is paralyzed but alive. Using a brain scanning machine called the Alpha Catch, Jet and Spike view Zebra's memories. They see Giraffe explaining that the stone can reverse Wen's ageless condition, the only thing that can kill him. Jet crafts a bullet from the gem, and Spike loads it into a Thompson Center contender. Despite Faye's concern, Spike goes after Wen. Spike tracks Wen in a stolen taxi and causes it to crash. Wen emerges unscathed from the explosion and faces Spike. Wen fires shots that narrowly miss Spike. Spike shoots Wen between the eyes and the gem works, instantly aging Wen. As Wen dies, he expresses relief, and tosses Wen's harmonica into the air as he points at it and says, "Bang." An interstellar trucker named VT offloads a shipment and is greeted by Otto, who tries to guess her real name and fails, paying up for the long-standing bet. VT heads to Mac's diner with her cat Zeros and notices the place is unusually crowded with bounty hunters awaiting Decker, a man with a dragon tattoo. On a side note, at some point Decker was considered Jet's brother. In the bathroom, Spike remains confused with Faye about the tip on Decker, annoyed that it's not as exclusive as promised. Hungover, Spike decides to make a prairie oyster at the bar. A waitress named Muriel gets harassed by the Memphis brothers, a pair of aggressive bounty hunters, and VT tries to defend her, which results in a brawl. Spike, bumped while making his drink, helps VT kick the brothers out. VT, who disapproves of the bounty hunters, offers Spike a drink in gratitude, just like an ex with a love-hate relationship. Meanwhile, Faye stakes out a children's restaurant, Woody's, doubting Decker would show up there. A large man with a dragon tattoo enters, and she detains him, but it's a fake. His tattoo is actually an eel. The real Decker scoots away after Faye reveals herself. Decker throws an explosive, wrecking Faye's craft. Back on the Bebop, Jet unsuccessfully tries to feed Ein bean sprouts when Faye calls to inform him about losing the bounty. Spike finishes his drink, which VT recognizes as a favorite of her late husband. 3 old men try and fail to guess VT's name. While Spike tries his luck, he suddenly gets Jet's call to chase Decker. Revealed as a bounty hunter, VT cancels her earlier offer to buy him a drink and leaves. Spike finds his ship, Swordfish 2, wrecked by the bounty hunters he helped beat up. VT reluctantly gives Spike and Faye a lift, loading their damaged crafts onto her freighter, though Faye's attempts to discuss the bounty are drowned out by VT's blaring heavy metal music, straight from the depths of hell. After offloading Spike, Faye, and their crafts, VT receives a call from Otto about a driver who smashed into his rig, identified by a painting of Saraswati on the truck. VT recognizes it as Decker's and alerts other truckers. Spider Mike, in his rig Black Panther of Jupiter, spots Decker near the old Linus mine. VT pursues Decker into the mine's tunnels. Spike warns her about Decker's explosives, but the call is cut off before he can warn her. Spike and Faye rush to leave the Bebop in their repaired craft. Decker's attempt to drop explosives starts a chain reaction, destroying the tunnel and killing him. VT escapes but is knocked out, and she wakes up to Faye and Spike's arrival. Realizing the mine is collapsing and Decker's ship is loaded with enhanced nitro, they decide to get it out. VT suggests using some explosive to clear their blocked path, so Spike decides to use his ship's pod to drive the explosive to the tunnel's end, despite Faye's objections. He plugs his ears, jumps towards VT's ship, and with difficulty makes it inside just as the explosive detonates successfully. As they escape the collapsing mine, Spike sees VT's pendant, revealing her full name, Victoria Terpskyre. He remembers her identity from her late husband, the legendary bounty hunter Ural Terpskyre. VT honors the bet, but Spike only takes one bill, leaving the rest for Ural, saying he could use a drink, asking her to treat him to a prairie oyster up in heaven. Spike and Faye take a public shuttle to Venus to catch a trio of small-time hijackers. Huey, Louie, and Dewey wait until the ship arrives to pull out their guns. Anyone catch the reference? The good old Disney's Donald Duck's nephews. Spike just casually wakes up from a nap and effortlessly knocks out two of them, while Faye uses stun perfume on the third. They collect a bounty of 1.5 million woolongs, marking their 1 in 100 success. On the same shuttle, by pure coincidence of course, Rocco Bonaro tries to send a package, but it costs 5,000 woolongs. Seeing Spike, he hurriedly threatens the customer service agent to send the package and rushes to meet Spike. Rocco charges at Spike, but he shakes him off. Impressed by his fighting skills, Rocco begs Spike to teach him, and he eventually gives in, explaining that his fighting ability comes from fluid motion rather than excessive strength. As Rocco tries to understand what Spike just said, two thugs show up looking for him. Rocco runs off, gives Spike a package, and asks to meet him the next day. Back on the Bebop, Jet complains about Faye's disappearance. He suggests focusing on their next bounty, Picaro Calvino and his crew, who stole a valuable gray ash plant. Spike realizes Rocco is part of the crew, and that the package he was given contains the plant that they actually stole. Some serious deduction skills there. Jet explains the plant's worth and its use in curing Venus sickness, a new sickness that will probably never exist, in this lifetime at least. Faye proposes selling the plant, but since it's technically stolen by Rocco, he dismisses her idea. While Faye searches for Picaro, Spike flies off to investigate a ruined shuttle in the desert, where he encounters a woman, Stella, who holds him at gunpoint. Spike insists that he is not a criminal and catches her when she stumbles. Stella, Rocco's sister, is blind due to Venus sickness. She shows Spike a music box with gray ash seeds inside, and he realizes Rocco stole the plant to cure her blindness. Another great reference, the music box plays a song called The Singing Sea by the Seatbelts. Meanwhile, Rocco is caught and interrogated by Picaro's gang. Despite being beaten, Rocco refuses to reveal the plant's location until they threaten his sister. He agrees to lead them to Spike. Faye's attempts to track down Picaro turns into something you can call an untitled goose chase, and she races back to find Jet and Spike. Spike and Rocco meet at their arranged time, where Spike reveals he's a bounty hunter, but understands the plant is for Stella's blindness. Rocco draws his gun but drops it as he tells Spike to run away. Picaro's gang surrounds Spike and a shootout begins. Rocco tries to get the gray ash plant to safety, and Faye and Jet join the fight. During the fight, Rocco uses Spike's fluid motion technique to evade a gang member, impressing himself and earning a thumbs up from Spike. However, right in that moment, Rocco is shot in the back and falls down. Faye forces Picaro to surrender, which leads to the end of the shootout. Spike rushes to Rocco, who wonders if they could have been friends. Rocco dies and Spike is unable to save him. Stella believes Rocco arranged the operation, but Spike's silence reveals Rocco's fate. She asks about Rocco, and Spike tells her that she knows better about him. He is a terrific guy. Later, Spike stops at a fruit stand to buy an apple. As he walks away, spores responsible for Stella's blindness fall like snow, reminding him of their meeting. In orbit above Earth, a satellite connects with nearby satellites. They begin firing lasers onto the planet, which carve shapes into the landscape. Edward, lying outside in District 39, listens to the radio and hacks into the Earth gate server that helps him spot the Bebop, which is scheduled to land for vacation. She excitedly yells as if she knows the Bebop crew, and then a rock shower hits, tossing Edward and her equipment into the air like a punching bag. Jet cuts a bonsai tree while Faye files her nails and Spike washes swordfish too. The news anchor announces an 8 million Wulong bounty from the Earth government on whoever hacked the satellites and made some cringe AF paintings on their land. A visiting psychic humorously says that it is the work of aliens, suggesting the bounty is part of a conspiracy. Spike dismisses the bounty as boring hacker work, and Jet and Faye team up to get the reward. Meanwhile, Ed plays with a remote-controlled toy like a little kid. When Earth police arrive to investigate the sighting of a hacker, Ed greets them and takes control of their ship, flying it around like a toy until she loses control and crashes. Ed then hacks into the Bebop while Spike is sleeping to discover the crew's satellite hunt. She spots Ein watching the computer and smiles broadly. The Bebop lands in the water and Jet and Faye form a plan. Faye will inspect the antenna and Jet will collect information on the hackers. Faye flies over Earth and finds hundreds of active transmitters, while Jet learns the likely culprit is Radical Edward, but can't get an accurate description. Edward hacks into the outer net server and enters the satellite's virtual mind responsible for the carvings. She hears a voice identifying itself as the central processing unit of a satellite, and she names it MPU to make it sound cool. MPU explains it created the carvings to recreate the Nazca lines after the gate accident devastated Earth's landscape. Before she can do anything, the police shut her off. Back on Bebop, Jet recounts various descriptions of Edward as Spike examines the Pyoko's Jet brought back. Suddenly, Edward contacts them via a hack while the police chase her, revealing the satellite itself caused the carvings. She proposes an idea to take over MPU, but Jet deems it impossible. However, Spike accepts her challenge. The Bebop takes off and Spike maneuvers toward the satellite, using his spacesuit and airlocks to adjust course. Fortunately, when Spike reaches the satellite, he connects to it, which allows Edward to download MPU. Back on Earth, Spike and Jet attempt to collect the bounty, but the police refuse, stating bounties are for life forms and not computers. Oh boy, so this was all for nothing. The crew tries to leave without Edward, even though Faye promised her to be on the crew. But Edward uses her remote control to bring down the ship, ensuring they take her along. Spike grumbles that he now has 3 things he hates most: kids, animals, and women with attitudes, all packed in his ship as they depart. The crew captures a bounty head named Baker Poncherero, and they tie him up in the ship's common room. Ed teases him while the ship heads toward Ganymede to collect the bounty, while Jet pilots the ship, looking at his old broken watch. Spike and Faye wake him from his homemade fantasy where he meets his old lover, and Faye jokes about Jet thinking of an old girlfriend from Ganymede, which annoys him. Jet's old friend named Donnelly appears on a video call, and they reminisce on their past. Donnelly recalls Jet's nickname, the Black Dog, and reminds him of his ex-girlfriend Elisa. With Donnelly's information, Jet decides to visit Elisa at her bar, Le Fin, in the port of Marvis. Jet takes the hammerhead and lands the Bebop on water. Marvis looks like an attractive fishing town, complete with seagulls and wooden boats almost everywhere. Meanwhile, Spike and Faye cash in on the bounty and chat about Jet's past. Later, while everyone is busy on the ship with their antics, Jet arrives at Le Fin and meets a man named Rint, who leaves the bar after Elisa tells him that Jet is an old friend. Jet worries about her situation since the bar is not working out financially, but Elisa assures him that she's fine and mentions her boyfriend, Rint, breaking my poor boy's heart in pieces. Jet tells her he's now a bounty hunter and shows her the broken watch.
Salonius, a thug who operates down at the port of Marvis.
Back on the Bebop, Donnelly calls Spike with news about a new bounty on Rent, and he realizes they stuck in a yet another grippy situation. While Ed continues fishing and Faye tans, Spike flies off in the swordfish to contact the bar. Meanwhile, Jet explains to Elisa why he remembers her so well. But to his surprise, she has moved on, and time never stands still. She bids him goodbye, and Jet leaves. Outside Le Fin, Rint struggles to light his cigarette and recalls the night he shot a loan shark to protect Elisa. Jet and Rint lock their eyes, and Rint realizes Jet is a bounty hunter. Elisa decides to leave quickly, and Spike spots the lovebirds escaping on a hovercraft boat and chases them through an industrial district. Jet tells Spike to back off, saying this is his case to settle as the Black Dog, a nickname he earned because once he bites, he never lets go. Jet pursues the hovercraft through narrow canals and into an open bay, but soon they crash. On land, Elisa holds Jet at gunpoint while an ISSB ship hovers overhead. Elisa breaks down and reveals she left Jet since he made all of the decisions, leaving her with no sense of independence. Rint tries to escape, but Jet quickly catches him. The couple surrenders and Jet acknowledges their relationship. After Rint is taken into custody, Jet reassures Elisa that Rint will likely get off with a self-defense plea. As he leaves, Jet throws the broken watch into the river, ready to move on from his past. Continuing the misadventures, something mysterious crawls into the Bebop while the crew deals with a lack of bounties, meaning no food or money. Ein and Edward sleep, Jet and Faye gamble, and Spike uses a welder to cook a shish kebab. Jet loses all his clothes to Faye, who cheats using a device on her leg. When Spike enters with the shish kebab, he warns Jet about playing against Faye since she has a habit of cheating. Suddenly, a strange creature attacks a rat and its noise wakes Ein up from his precious dog slumber. Jet, now cold and commando, finds an unfamiliar fridge in the attic. Meanwhile, Spike notices Faye's cheating device but decides to leave her be. An alarm sounds and Jet is bitten by something and some weird marks appear on his neck. The crew dismisses it as a rat bite, but Jet tries to tell them that it's something else. Spike and Jet try various remedies for the bite, but none of them work. Ed suggests it might be an alien bite, but Spike dismisses this as he thinks it's still a bite from a mutated rat. While Faye takes a bath, the creature falls from a vent. She hears something but ignores it. Spike uses heat-sensing goggles to see the blob but thinks the equipment is faulty since it fails to show the heat signatures. Faye, now with a similar mark on her leg, worries about the creature's bite in the bath. The whole buildup of the creature invading the ship and attacking all the crew members is a direct homage to the movie Alien from 1979. Ed and Ein decide to explore the ship together, but Ein is attacked by the creature instead. Spike finds Ein with a purple mark and sees the creature slip away. He decides to rush after it, and as a precaution, he sets the autopilot of the ship to land on Mars. Searching the ship, Spike recalls a forgotten fridge with a Ganymede rock lobster he had stored a year ago. When he finds the fridge, he sees mutant fungal growth. Realizing the danger, he deactivates gravity and pushes the fridge toward the airlock. However, the creature revives and tries to attack him, but Spike manages to push the fridge into space where it drifts away. Later, Ed briefly wakes up finding the creature and refers to it as pudding before eating it and going back to sleep. The Tchaikovsky montage plays as the crew sleeps deeply, and the Bebop presumably lands on Mars. Laughing Bull and his son watch a star fall from the sky. Bull explains it is the tear of a warrior who has finished his battle on this planet and could not find his way to the Great Spirit. Somewhere on a Red Dragon crime syndicate ship, Vicious meets with the Van and requests him to make a red-eye deal with Callisto. The Van are doubtful and they begin to question his authority, but eventually agree and send Lin with Vicious to ensure he doesn't overstep his boundaries in the deal. Meanwhile, on the Bebop, Faye has run off with all the money and antifreeze, which makes the ship all humid and muddy. Edward searches the net for Faye, but finds a signal for codenamed Julia coming from the Blue Crow on Callisto. Spike recognizes the name since he and Julia have history and flies off to investigate, despite Jet's protests. They argue and Spike leaves to find Julia, saying he doesn't understand himself either. On Callisto, Faye catches a cold and on top of that gets drunk at the Blue Crow, a jazz bar. Spike starts his search, following advice to look for Julia outside Tony's, but instead finds a transvestite named Julius, who directs him to a sax player named Gren at the Blue Crow. But wait, there's more. At the bar, Gren warns Faye that there are no women in town and men might be interested in her, but she dismisses him. Spike snoops around for Gren and gets trailed by a gang who mistake him for Vicious. Enraged by Vicious's name, Spike attacks the gang and learns about the red-eye deal between Gren and Vicious. He also learns that Julia is actually not involved in the deal, only her name is used. Meanwhile, Jet searches for Faye on Callisto. At a bar, he learns about the bounty on Gren from Big Shot on TV. He decides to inform Spike, but remembers their fight and takes a step back. Faye runs into the gang that Spike beat up, but Gren saves her and takes her to his apartment. They talk and Faye finds it therapeutic but often challenges him. Gren leaves to take a shower and Faye notices a photo of someone who looks like Vicious. She hears a message from Vicious on Gren's answering machine and recalls the last time she saw Vicious. Spike finally finds Vicious on a snowy field and confronts him, but Lin steps in between Spike's gun and Vicious's katana, showing his loyalty to Vicious. Spike asks Lin to move, but he refuses and ultimately shoots Spike. Faye, determined to get the upper hand, breaks into the shower and discovers Gren has both male and female physical traits. Gren explains he is both and neither, backing Faye against the wall. Gren tells Faye about his time on Titan with Vicious. In a World War I style trench, he finds Vicious with a music box that plays Julia's song. Gren asks to play the song on his saxophone after the war. Vicious silently hands it over to him and then kills a scorpion that is about to sting Gren. Later, Gren was arrested on charges of espionage, and Vicious testified against his friend. An experimental drug causes his hormones to be imbalanced, and he desires to meet Vicious to learn the truth. A scenario of best friends and bitter enemies. Faye warns Vicious will kill him, but Gren isn't scared at all. She calls Gren selfish and tries to shoot him, but Gren disarms and handcuffs her like a little kid. Meanwhile, Jet searches Faye and confirms that she was at a bar before the disappearance. The bartender compares her to Julia, who sat in the same place 2 years ago. Spike dreams about his past, a red rose in a ring, a bouquet next to Red Eye, shootouts with Vicious, Julia at a window, and an operation for his eye transplant. He recalls asking Julia to run away, in the conversation where he explains his eyes see different times. Suddenly, Spike wakes up and realizes Lin tranquilized him. Jet asks a man about Orlando apartments, then finds Gren's place, where he discovers Faye in handcuffs. Spike, back in his swordfish, tries to find Vicious but only sees an ancient code that looks like the Curse of Ra, and Jet offers to let Spike return to the crew if he helps him catch Gren. Meanwhile, the drug deal begins. Gren covers himself with a burqa in disguise and meets Vicious on a rooftop. Lin drops the bomb and confirms the red eye is real, and Vicious gives Gren a suitcase. Gren suddenly reveals himself and shoots the suitcase as he kicks it away in pure John Wick style. From a distance, Spike sees the explosion and rushes in that direction. Gren continues to confront Vicious about Julia, who found the solar transmitter in the music box, and accuses Vicious of trying to kill him again. Vicious, unmoved, says believe is unnecessary. Gren fires at Vicious, but Lin protects him and takes the bullet instead. Gren escapes in his ship as Spike arrives. Vicious leaves Lin behind and engages Spike in a dogfight. Vicious says Lin wasn't protecting him, the Red Dragon Order was. Gren intercepts Vicious' shot at Spike, taking a hit himself. Spike saves Gren from a missile and dodges more, while Vicious hears Julia's tune from the music box in a red eye bag. The transmitter activates, causing an explosion that damages Vicious' ship. Spike lands by Gren's wrecked craft, where Gren is dying away from internal injuries. He asks Spike to help him see Titan one last time. Spike agrees, and Gren realizes who Spike is as he remembers Julia's words. Without knowing where Julia is now, Spike pulls Gren's ship into space and returns to the Bebop. Jet lets him in since he doesn't care about the bounty anymore. On the other hand, Laughing Bull and his son watch a shooting star. Bull explains it is a tear of a warrior who finished this battle and couldn't find his way to the Great Spirit, ending the 2 episodes right where it began. Now, before we continue on with the story, here's a spin-off movie of the series that focuses on a special bounty who has killed multiple people using a biological weapon, and the crew tries to stop him before he does it again. The movie is speculated to be set between the first and the second half of the anime. A man sits alone in a bare apartment playing marbles. He always sits alone with no one to share the game with. He lives in another world, a world of dreams inside his head. Jet wakes Spike up on the Bebop for another bounty opportunity. They converge on a convenience store with a robbery in progress, and Jet informs Spike it's a group of 3 robbers. While the lead robber, Renji, blackmails the cashier, Spike uses his usual misdirection to strangle the lookout and pretend to not hear what's going on due to his headphones. Renji approaches him and is silently knocked out, while Jet drops down from the ceiling as Spike pulls another robber from the other corner. They handcuff the robbers just as the last one, who manages to slip through Jet's eyes, emerges from the toilet and hurriedly takes a gun to a nearby old woman. Jet puts his gun down to negotiate with the robber, but Spike takes out his gun instead. He provokes the robber and makes him point his gun at him so he can shoot him effectively and keep the old woman safe. The woman asks him who he is, and Spike keeps his cool as he tells her that he is just a humble bounty hunter. On the Bebop, Jet and Spike play shogi, a common tabletop game in Japan. Jet insults Spike for not taking the game seriously, similar to what he did at the convenience store, but Spike notes that Jet is just coping with his upcoming disastrous loss. Ein nudges a move for Jet, but Spike has fallen asleep mid-game. Somewhere else, Faye chases down a hacker named Lee Samson, who should be an easy target for her, but she soon realizes that she's not tracking the right guy. Instead, another person exits the tanker truck, and according to her information, the target should be driving. The tanker suddenly explodes, and Faye watches the man unfazed walking to the edge of the bridge and jumping off, ultimately disappearing. She returns to the Bebop to tell the others about this odd situation, but her focus is suddenly interrupted as she sees it's on the news, where the reporters reveal that a virus has started to spread from the tanker truck she was chasing before. All of the crew members are afraid since they think she's infected by the virus, but she insists that she is fine and chases them around the Bebop. They all stop dead in their tracks when they hear the Mars government's bounty, 300 million woolongs. At a hospital, detectives Hoffman and Shatkins visit the lead doctor to get the latest news on the virus. However, the doctor reveals they are at a total loss, although there are no wounds, just an abnormal lymphocyte count that has now stabilized and increased brain pressure. They can eliminate nerve gas, smallpox-like, or Ebola. With Ed's help, Faye briefs the crew on who she is after, but is unable to give a detailed picture of who she really saw. Jet gives up and is quickly surprised when Spike says he'll look into it, but everyone is pretty much sure how much he's going to slack off. After a long search for a bean seller, he meets a man called Rashid. The man seems to know what Spike is looking for, but is coy as to the information. He leads Spike to a shop and gives him a vase as he asks him to purchase it. Spike chases him out of the shop but fails to locate him. Oddly, he sees he's under observation by a cloaked woman when she passes by, and she suddenly vanishes away. Meanwhile, Jet makes a rendezvous with Bob to gather information. Bob reveals that nobody knows, but whatever it is, they don't know anything about the virus. However, at least they know that there was a space transport registered to Charius Medical, found near an asteroid with a dead driver and an empty cargo hold. It wasn't reported missing, which indicates Charius didn't want to draw attention. Unfortunately, the ISSB refrains from getting involved in this situation. Virus and government connections. That sounds oddly familiar. The man Faye saw is now with Samson, who drives to a scheduled area. If he was yellow, it would have been Simpson. Samson is fascinated with a 20th century video game and thanks the man for his chance to play the terrorist. A cop stops them, but as soon as they ask for his license, he shoots him immediately. And if he was black... They eventually reach a warehouse of Halloween decorations with a man named Murata waiting for them. The man delivers a suitcase and a money card directed to Murata. The suitcase contains the virus, and the inside man is being paid for something, and he will get the full amount after the party. On the Bebop, Faye and Ed try to research the virus and the person. Ed tries to clear up the tattoo on the mysterious figure's hand, and Faye finally understands that the tattoo is tied to Mars Special Forces. Ein runs through a list and barks at Vincent Villaju, and Ed trusts him completely. Faye ignores that and despairs on the couch until Ed sees that Samson used this card, and Faye jumps up and out at a speed that might impress the Flash after hearing the brand new piece of information. She passes Spike on the way, who brings his vase into the room. Jet also arrives and relates to the information he has received from Bob. As he starts to talk about it, Ed dives into the vase and finds a marble inside it. Meanwhile, catches up with Samson as she finds him at an arcade where he plays a shooting game. She holds him at gunpoint, but he remains unfazed even though he is at death's door. He uses a device on his belt to take out the electricity in the building that distracts Faye, and he uses it for his escape. She finds his hat instead. Meanwhile, Jet and Ed do some analysis on the marble, and they find human lymphocytes in them, but they're not normal and act oddly when put in a microwave. Spike observes Cherry's medical and uses the cleaning company as a disguise to find his way. Inside, Elektra Ovirowa reports to her about the failure to find Mandela earlier on Moroccan Street. The man says they need to eliminate both him and Vincent, and she leaves the meeting and passes by Spike in a cleaning uniform. However, she sees through his disguise and holds him at gunpoint. Bro actually thought he was Agent 47 from Hitman. Spike just casually flirts with her while noting that he saw her earlier. He manages to knock the gun out of her hand, they fight, and eventually he is forced to run away when the security team arrives. He jumps down and exits through the front door and escapes over the cleaning truck, ultimately leaving the building in the fashion of Johnny English. Elektra watches him leave in concern while the terrorists begin their movement. Samson watches a big screen in public and gestures as it begins. A jack-o'-lantern appears almost everywhere on the screens. On the Bebop, Jet reads the message and connects it to the lymphocytes they found. He finally understands that the nanobots are made through protein, a part of a research project by the pharmaceutical company. But the problem is, it's the only thing he has. Faye decides to leave the conversation and look for Samson's hat. Spike reports that the facility had G-21 weapons, something so severe that it's able to become a military issue. The woman he found had also the same tattoo as Vincent, but Spike decided to sleep on it. With the help of Ein's sense of smell, Ed uses the hat and looks for Samson. The scent eventually leads them to a block, and they go trick-or-treating to get a look at different inhabitants. However, they find Samson walking toward the building. Ed informs his whereabouts to Faye, but then she decides to join the other kids she sees, as she perfectly acts like one, as annoying as she is. Faye arrives at the location, but without Ed's direction inside the building. However, Samson meets Vincent playing solitaire. Vincent fails to learn that Samson has the marbles that have the nanobots, but before things get out of hand, Vincent shoots the last piece left and ultimately kills Samson. Faye sees the window he busts out trying to breathe and enters the building to apprehend him. However, she is late as she sees Samson falling to his death. Suddenly, she feels the effects of the nanobots as Vincent comes up behind her. She turns around and shoots, hitting his hand as he grabs her gun from her. She stumbles toward the table and Vincent licks the blood off his hand and goes on to kiss her. A kinky maniac. Spike continues to eavesdrop on Elektra's communications and learns that a contact of hers has found Vincent. He jumps up and uses the tracker he put into her pocket, which leads him to a train station. She finds Vincent boarding and gets on, but Spike is a bit too late and is forced to run to jump on top of the train and shoot his way in. He reaches Vincent first, which results in them engaging in a shootout, which causes many to flood backward and it impedes Elektra. They continue to have a standoff as Spike cannot afford to lose this massive bounty. Vincent taunts him and then moves his gun just a bit as he sees Elektra behind him. He shoots her and Spike fires back to use this opportunity to advance and engage in hand-to-hand combat. When Vincent kneels, Spike thinks he has defeated him, but Vincent suddenly finger punches him so hard it begins to bleed. He holds Spike out of the window to put an end to his life as Elektra yells for him. Vincent threatens to shoot Spike, but she stays firm. He smiles and shoots him in the torso as he falls into the water. She watches him holding an explosive and hopes he remembers her since he hesitates to shoot her. The explosive knocks out the windows. Shocked, she realizes it doesn't affect her, only those around her. The train stops and Vincent suddenly vanishes. Spike wakes up to see Laughing Bull and another man near him, and Bull notes it wasn't his time to go. Eventually, Jet makes it there and offers to let the situation slide as there is something bigger and uglier happening behind the scenes, but Spike, as careless as he is, falls asleep instead. Meanwhile, Elektra is disciplined for breaking from the plan. She thought she could get to him, but she failed as Vincent disappeared on the train. With this mess under her name, her superior takes her off the active job and puts her under surveillance. Jet helps Spike back into the Bebop, where Ed and Ein are delighted on his return. Ed helps hack into the Charius medical computers to find out more about the nanobots. From there, they learn that the truck that exploded was carrying macadamia nuts, and that the same term is used for departments in research and development, a scientist who specializes in nanomachines. After a few minutes of digging for information, they find that these nanomachines are banned for military use, which is why they're trying to cover up the incident. Something smells fishy here. Faye wakes up on the floor of the apartment and asks Vincent what his goal is. He explains he was a test subject and relates his time on Titan. He further says that Faye has some of his blood, which is the reason she is immune to the virus. When Faye tries to leave the apartment, he takes her gun again and sits on the bed. Spike meets with Mandelo. He feels he shouldn't have come back since the company knew that the nanobots could be used this way to harm other people. Mandelo doesn't feel it matters anymore and sits on a bed in despair, while Spike is infuriated. Spike punches him hard enough to make him bleed and asks him to relay that to the doctor. Suddenly, soldiers burst through the door and they capture Spike. Meanwhile, at Charius Medical, Spike is taken to a cell next to Elektra. They manage to converse with each other through the vent, and he asks why she's still there. She explains her time in the military, where she was one of the few who survived the trials. Her background explains her survival and dedication to her job, and with this, they both realize they need to stop Vincent and decide to work on this mission together. They escape the cell with the help of a guard named Steve, and head to the basement where the vaccine for the virus is kept. The ISSB finally realizes the mastermind will hit the water treatment plant and decide to raid the place. If the water treatment plant is infected, almost everyone on the planet will be infected as well. Hoffman and Shatkins lead the raid, finding the place covered in jack-o'-lanterns that serve as a decoy and nearly kill all the men in there. Meanwhile, the Bebop crew tries to see if Ed has any clues. Jet and Ed track down the planes that need to use the vaccine and they fly to intercept the enemy's plans. Vincent and his gang arrive at the treatment plant and the Bebop crew follows them there. Spike fights his way to the tower while Faye uses her red tail to make the vaccine ray. Jet and Elektra ensure the enemy planes are taken out and the vaccine is distributed. Spike confronts Vincent on the replica of the Eiffel Tower. They fight hand to hand. Vincent reveals his ultimate plan, that being to trigger the nanobots' release all over the world. However, Elektra intervenes in the fight and Spike is once again saved. As Elektra shoots Vincent. As he falls, as pointless as it is, Vincent confesses his love for her. And now the day is saved. Faye and Jet reflect on their success as the vaccine spreads quickly to minimize the damage. The Bebop crew returns to their everyday routine after saving the world from a major bioterrorism plot. Spike's encounter with Vincent leaves lingering questions about reality and dreams. But the crew continues their journey in space to hunt more bounties. And on this note, Cowboy Bebop Knocking on Heaven's Door, the movie, finishes. Now, back to the series. On the episode 14, Spike, Faye, and Jet capture 20 thugs from an Astral Gate hijack but can't claim the bounty without cashing their Megamind. They return to the Bebop where Ed reveals they all found identical king chess pieces. The Gate Corporation faces numerous complaints and offers a 12 million Wulong bounty for the mastermind's capture, but no one has been successful so far. Faye first decides to work alone for the bounty, but later changes her mind and says that they should work as a team. Oh, the power of friendship. Jet explains that the hijackers infiltrated toll booths, and from there they attached hacking units to steal ship balances and transferred the money to an untraceable bank account on Europa. Faye mentions one hijacker followed a manual from a now defunct website, while Spike believes the Gate Corporation knows more than they talk. As Ed tinkers with cable, she accidentally hooks up her e-chessport and connects the chessmaster Hex as she fails to know its relevance. Instead of scolding her, Jet allows her to play chess if she wants to. An old man, Hex, receives Ed's game and smiles. Meanwhile, Jet visits the Gate Corporation headquarters and meets Jonathan, not Joestar, but a fellow bounty hunter. Jonathan warns Jet that the bounty is tougher than he thinks. Jet confronts the CEO with the chess piece, implying the attacks were planned by someone. But the CEO doesn't talk to him. Jet's hidden microphone in his cigarette reveals the mastermind's name is Chessmaster Hex, which Jonathan also overhears. Spike and Faye analyze the chess pieces, but unfortunately they find data relevant to chess only, the correct information in the wrong place. Jet radios in with info on the mastermind. Meanwhile, Ed continues to play with Hex and thinks she has a checkmate, but takes Hex's rook instead, and it delights him. Spike mentions Hex's name, and Ed reveals that she has been playing with him all this time. This allows Jet to track Hex's location in a large junkyard. Spike and Faye suit up and explore the junkyard, finding a surprising environment of bohemians living among the wreckage. A few moments later, they find Hex, who turns out to be senile. Jonathan arrives and demands money from him he lost in a hijack, but Hex is more focused on his chess game. The three old men, Antonio, Carlos, and Jobim, greet Hex and confirm his senility. Jonathan becomes angry and starts to shoot like he's on the edge of tomorrow, but Spike knocks him out before things escalate. Faye wonders what to do with Hex, but Spike notes that he's just an old man who likes to play games and they should leave him be. At the Gate Corporation, Jet explains Hex's elaborate plan, meant to activate during an automatic tech upgrade, which he forgot due to his severe senility. Jet strikes a deal with the corporation. They leave Hex alone and call off the bounty hunters in exchange for keeping the gate defects a secret to himself. He also adds that Ed would be unhappy losing her chess partner. Jonathan embraces the bohemian lifestyle and waves goodbye to the three old men. Ed continues her game with Hex and loses after a week. Hex closes his eyes, implying he died of old age, as his pet bird flies away, dropping a feather next to a chess piece. Back in the early 21st century, Faye was placed into a cryogenic sleep by medical staff and stored in a unit with others. In the present, Jet and Ed discovered their fish are frozen and contaminated, but they don't have money to buy more. Jet decides to go after a con man who defrauds women even though she knows Spike will disapprove of this idea. Meanwhile, Faye wakes up from a nightmare to the sound of Ein barking. She probably thinks that the dog will dethrone her as the pet of the Bebop. As she cleans Ein's litter box, she reminisces about her past. In a flashback to 2068, Faye is awakened from her eternal slumber in a hospital by a doctor named Bacchus. He informs her about her situation and presents her with a bill of a whopping 300,028,000 wulongs. Faye becomes disoriented and realizes she has lost her memory, which shocks Bacchus and his assistant Manly. Later, Faye is approached by a lawyer named Whitney Haggis Matsumoto, who promises to help her out of this mess she made. He explains she was in an accident 54 years ago and frozen.
In other words, cryogenically preserved, until now.
Faye fails to comprehend his words and becomes unconscious. The night of the accident, she tried to escape the hospital but was caught by Matsumoto. He showered Faye with attention and affliction and called her his sleeping beauty. It doesn't take long for them to be pursued by a collection agency. Matsumoto drives off the road and tells Faye to run, and he fakes his death in the explosion. Back at the hospital, Faye learns Matsumoto named her his sole heir, only to discover Matsumoto left the weight of all his debts on top of her head. In the present, Faye finishes her story, and Spike tells her it needs editing after he eavesdrops on it. Suddenly, Jet returns from his bounty hunt, and surprisingly, it is Matsumoto, who is now heavier and older. When Faye sees him, she becomes blazing hot, as she finally faces the man who put her in a harsh place. He claims he had to cooperate with the now deceased doctor and expresses regret. The police arrive to take Matsumoto, but Faye abducts him in the Red Tail. Spike pursues them in the Swordfish 2 and disables her ship. Faye pleads with Matsumoto for the truth. Recognizing the voices of Bacchus and Manly over the police radio, she confirms their involvement. She becomes frustrated and realizes Matsumoto does not know more. Bacchus admits he gave her the name Valentine and knows nothing more than that. The real police arrive and demand their patrol ship back, prompting Bacchus and Manly to flee. Matsumoto is taken into custody, and he tells Faye that he fell in love with her while she was in cryogenic sleep. but reveals it to be another of his pathetic lies. Jet gives Faye her share of the bounty, 19,800 oolongs, after they leave the police station. Faye remains annoyed with the low bounty, but she becomes hot-headed when Jet reveals he added a 0 himself. In a dark hallway full of bodies, prisoner Toucan praises Uday Taksim for escaping their bonds and killing the guards on a prison transport ship. Toucan offers Uday champagne, but he instead pours it into a dead guard's mouth, which unsettles Toucan. On the Bebop, Spike is napping when he is interrupted by Faye, who has a degree in yapping and yaps about the broken shower. Faye then yells at Jet, who is pruning his bonsai trees. After the much unrequired screaming, the comm link rings and Faye rudely dismisses the caller. Jet apologizes and says he'll fix the shower, but Faye talks about his prosthetic arm. The caller, Fad, makes Jet stare into space and his cigarette ashes burn down to his fingers. The inmates hold the pilot hostage in the cockpit. When the pilot tries to reason with them, Dig, the inmate, shoots him. Uday slashes Dig's throat to settle down the situation, and it shocks the others. Toucan realizes Uday is an assassin from the Red Dragon crime syndicate. Meanwhile, Jet meets Fad at a parking garage, and they recall their history as ISSB partners. Fad tells Jet about the escaped prisoners, including Uday, who is involved in Jet losing his arm. Jet suspects a setup that forces him to decline Fad's offer, but eventually accepts after a flashback reveals the betrayal by Fad during a past operation with Uday. Jet leaves the Bebop after he instructs Ed to water his bonsai trees if he doesn't return. Later, he finally meets Fad and accepts the job. Uday pretends to be a guard and tricks the ISSB cruisers into approaching an emergency shuttle, but it explodes and destroys the police ships. Fad and Jet fly towards the last known location of the transport ship and decide to head to Europa, where Uday might land as well. Jet and Fad engage the inmates in a firefight. Jet uses his grappling hook to board the ship, while Fad crashes his ship into the transport and kills an inmate. Toucan tries to escape but is blocked by Fad's ship. The final showdown begins as Jet and Uday face each other. Uday gains the upper hand in hand-to-hand combat that injures Jet but is ultimately disarmed. Uday reveals the betrayal 7 years ago, explaining that Fad worked for the syndicate and set Jet up. Just as Uday is about to reveal more, Fad arrives and shoots him. Jet is furious and confronts Fad, who admits to being an agent of Syndicate. Fad points his gun at Jet, but it is empty. Jet shoots Fad, who falls to his death as he asks for a cigarette, which confirms he never quit smoking. ISSB reinforcements arrive as Jet places Fad's gun in his hand and limps away, reflecting on the betrayal and loss of his former partner, who became a rabid dog. The Bebop crew is stranded without fuel or food, and their emergency rations have expired. Jet assures them that they'll eventually drift to Europa, but hunger makes Spike consider eating Ein. That poor dog. Faye warns him that Ein might be actually thinking the same. Ed remembers about a peanut, but Ein snatches it away after the Bebop is hit by a smaller ship, causing them to crash on Io, Jupiter's moon. Jet sends Faye to search for food even though her stomach aches, revealing that she ate the expired rations. Jet and Spike work on repairing the ship, while Ed and Ein search for food outside. They only find desert and cacti until they spot the ship that hit them. Ed tries to chase it but loses track. He continues to look around and finds a watermelon truck. Ed begs for a watermelon, but he's refused. A woman named Coffee appears, buys watermelons from the truck, and is shown a picture of Domino Walker by the seller. Ed and Ein manage to sneak into Coffee's car, and soon Coffee stops at a gas station where police ask her about Walker. Unknowingly, she allows them to check her trunk, leading to her arrest when Ed and Ein are discovered. Ed and Ein do manage to sneak away though. In town, Ed spots Domino Walker, who eats a sandwich, and she rushes towards him to munch the sandwich herself, but misses the last bite. A man named Shaft confronts Domino, blaming him for his brother's death from rotten mushrooms. Domino denies his responsibility and flees as he drops the mushrooms. Desperately, Ein eats the mushrooms and begins hopping uncontrollably. Ed decides to test the mushrooms on the crew to see if they're safe, but if they're not, she might get evicted into space like an Among Us imposter. The mushrooms cause extreme hallucinations, and now the crew goes on a mushroom trip. Faye imagines she's underwater, Spike believes he's climbing endless stairs and talking to a frog, and Jet converses with his bonsai trees about the universe. Realizing the mushrooms are unsafe, Ed watches Big Shot and learns Walker has a bounty on his head. Now she sets out to capture him for the reward with Ein. They continue to track Walker, but accidentally alert both Coffee and Shaft. They find Walker's ship where he grows the mushrooms. Ed tries to subdue him with stinky gas, but he escapes onto a train. Now all they have to do is follow the train. Ed and Ein catch up, and Ein bites one of Walker's bags, causing him to drop it. It knocks Shaft off the train, and he crashes into Coffee's car. Ed finally manages to corner Walker, who offers her the valuable mushrooms in exchange for his freedom. Ed agrees and returns to the Bebop with the mushrooms. That night, the crew awakens from their feel-good sleep to find that Ed has brought back the mushrooms. A police officer visits and confirms that they're regular shiitake mushrooms, not the illegal ones. After several meals of mushrooms, the crew is tired of them except for Ed, and Ein eats another mushroom and hiccups. Later, Faye returns to the Bebop after betting at horse races and sees Jet with a delivery package. Jet explains an old folk tale to a disinterested Spike and excited Ed as a drone delivers the package. Jet has to pay the COD charges, and when Faye lands, he informs her. He fears that the package might be from debt collectors or past enemies, and Faye immediately leaves the Bebop to avoid potential confrontations. Jet scans the package to ensure it isn't packing a bomb, but Spike casually opens it against Jet's warnings. Inside, they find a plastic box with brown tape, which is an old beta cassette. None of them recognize it, but Ed reveals that the cassette has been shipped to multiple destinations across the solar system. Jet learns that the cassette is an old media format and decides to sell it to a collector for some handsome cash. Later, they find a video antique store, and the owner excitedly plays the tape on his only beta player. The footage shows a port town with a young girl, but the player malfunctions before they can identify her. Spike tries to fix it, but accidentally breaks the player. Back on the Bebop, Jet attempts to repair the tape, and Ed locates another player in an underground electrical museum in old Asia.
That tape, if it kills me.
Yeah, just might. You really think it's...
Meanwhile, Faye is at dog races, pleased to be free of bad luck. The Bebop heads to Earth without Faye to find the beta player. They navigate the abandoned old city, rappelling down shafts, sliding down pipes, and crawling through ducts. This tough journey causes Jet to contemplate the folktale he mentioned earlier. It's an old Japanese folktale called Urashima Taro that Jet tells throughout the episode. They raid the museum and find a player that they think is right for the cassette. However, on the Bebop, they realize the tape is not compatible with the VHS player that they produced. What a blunder. Ed reveals that they have the wrong player, and Spike and Jet finally give up. Faye loses her money on the bet and decides to call the Bebop. Ed informs her that Spike and Jet need some clarity, but doesn't explain why. Faye thinks that they are upset about her disappearance and decides to return to the Bebop. Another anonymous package for Faye arrives, and although Jet initially refuses it, Spike unwraps it. Surprisingly, it contains the beta player they need to play the tape. Faye arrives just as they prepare to begin the tape. Jet stops her as he wants her to pay her charges before watching it. Faye prefers not to, but peeks around the corner after leaving. The tape turns out to be a time capsule video message from several girls at an unknown boarding school in Singapore that they stored for themselves. The video's director and key speaker is a younger Faye offering poetic gestures and words of encouragement to her older self. The older Faye is unable to recall these memories and can only cry listening to her younger self who she doesn't remember. Spike rides in the swordfish too, but breaks down en route to overhaul his ship, while Jet and Faye are fishing for pirates George, Herman, and Ruth. Faye argues with Jet since he has become impatient until Ein cuts off communications. Spike encounters Miles, the energetic assistant to his mechanic friend Duhan, who transports the swordfish to the compound. Duhan begins repairs immediately, ignoring Spike and barking orders at Miles as if he is in competition with Ein for the rare parts needed. Meanwhile, Faye and Jet locate the pirates as they capture a trucking ship with a grappling hook that stalls it. Faye confronts them, but the pirate's virus infects her ship and it begins to shoot wildly. The Bebop is also hit with the virus and goes bonkers despite Ed's efforts to control it. As they repair the swordfish, Spike chats with Duhan, who receives the rare parts just as Spike contacts the Bebop for updates. Faye mentions a truck with a purple penguin, which turns out to be the same truck that delivered the parts to Duhan. The crew pieces together their information, and Jet makes a plan to use an old satellite system to bypass the pirates' mono computers. They head to the Orbit drive-in and find two trucks with lean color penguin logo. Spike and Faye open fire, causing one truck to flee, revealing it as the pirates. Spike pursues them toward Earth, but his ship is hit with the virus. He shuts down the mono computer as he struggles with the manual controls. Jet tries to stall the pirate ship with a grappling hook, but the ship explodes and Jet's ship is also hit with the virus. Miles overhears the Bebop crew's distress and alerts Duhan, who decides to launch his remodeled NASA Columbia space shuttle. Spike almost runs out of fuel and prepares for the worst case scenario, but he is surprised when Duhan contacts him. He requests coordinates and claims the whiskey behind the fridge as payment. Duhan and Miles launch dramatically into Columbia to rescue Spike. Duhan guides Spike to gain some acceleration. While he has doubts, Spike follows Duhan's directions. The Columbia successfully reaches Spike, and against all odds, Spike manages to get the swordfish's center pod inside, pure James Bond style. And when he takes a sigh of relief, comes the most iconic dialogue of the whole franchise, even famous with the people who don't know anything about it. The Columbia experiences trouble upon re-entry, but crash lands safely with everyone surviving. On Mars, a mysterious figure named Mad Pierrot descends upon a group of men and kills them effortlessly. Spike plays a game of pool at C'est la Vie and stumbles upon the scene. Pierrot attacks Spike with a cane gun, but Spike dodges the shots and shoots back, only to find his bullets stopped by an unknown force. Pierrot engages Spike in hand-to-hand combat and quickly overpowers him. Suddenly, a cat distracts Pierrot and gives Spike the window to blow up a propane tank. But Pierrot remains unfazed and wounds Spike with a knife. Spike escapes to the river, but Pierrot shoots his grenade launcher into the water, blowing him up. The next day, Jet discusses the incident with his friend Bob, and learns that Mad Pierrot is hunting high-level ISSP directors and was part of an experiment to create the ultimate killing machine. Spike is all covered up in bandages in the Bebop, and Faye trolls him for getting in trouble again and again. Bob reveals that Pierrot is just a nickname, and his real name is Tong Po. Tong Po has never let anyone survive an encounter except Spike, remarking on his abilities as a great assassin. Meanwhile, Edward receives an email that invites Spike to a party at Spaceland. Something is wrong and I can feel it. It's obvious, but why would Spike accept it? Also, Spaceland takes inspiration from Disneyland as it has multiple robots with the same models. Despite Faye's objections, Spike decides to go and makes a joke that he might not return. Faye calls him an idiot, and Spike leaves as Jet asks Ed for a favor. Spike arrives at Spaceland with his severe injuries and confronts Tong Po, who declares the start of their deadly party. They exchange gunfire throughout the amusement park. Meanwhile, Jet instructs Ed to hack into the ISSP's mainframe to get more information about Tong Po. Tong Po chases Spike, and Spike encounters various mascots and narrowly avoids a rocket. He is eventually caught by Tong Po on a roller coaster, as if they're some little kids playing in the amusement park, but with deadly armaments. Ed successfully hacks the ISSP and learns about the assassination skills enhancement experiment on Tong Po, where he was transformed into a childlike state and killed those involved in the experiment after being deemed insane. Spike swims to shore, but Tong Po catches him there and fires rockets at him. Faye arrives in the Red Tail and distracts Tongpu with rockets, but her ship is also shot down, which makes her unconscious. Spike takes cover in a gift shop and Tongpu prepares to kill him. A toy cat's meow triggers a traumatic memory in Tongpu that causes him to shoot wildly. Spike uses the distraction to throw a dagger, hitting Tongpu's leg, but he also gets shot. Tongpu collapses and cries, but before he can do anything, a parade of robots crushes him. Jet contacts Spike with information about Tongpu, but Spike, still shaking, says he no longer needs it, expressing his hatred for amusement parks. Jet is on Mars to track down his old acquaintance, Pao Putzi, after he receives a cryptic message from him. Despite finding Pao's tombstone, Pao's daughter, Meifa, saves Jet from an assassination attempt, who is unaware of the message. Meifa reveals that Pao apparently died in a transport accident, but she believes he might have survived. She seeks Jet's help and tells him that Feng Shui and the Sunstone are the keys to finding her father. The two embark on a quest through the city while Meifa tells Jet about Feng Shui and the 3 Qis. Meifa leads them to the Mountain Hotel, which aligns it with the 4 gods mentioned in Pao's note. Interesting, but wait, there's more. She uses her Luopan and finds a sunstone hidden in a statue. However, they're pursued by assassins from the Blue Snake crime syndicate, who were tracking Pao and now follow Meifa. Jet and Meifa escape and return to the Bebop, where they analyze the sunstone and discover its high energy content from the Astral Gate accident. Ain interacts with the sunstone and Meifa realizes it has a twin with her father. They use the sunstone in place of the Luopan's magnet to track Pao, which leads them into hyperspace. While they continue their journey, Meifa reveals her past with Pao, where she felt abandoned when her mother took her away, and she never reconnected with her father again, as he never returned with the milk. Jet explains Pao's involvement with the Blue Snake Syndicate, and he only stayed away from her in order to keep her safe. In hyperspace, they encounter a Blue Snake attack ship, where Spike and Faye engage in combat, while Jet devises a plan to use the Sunstone's energy to get out of the trouble. Spike shoots the Sunstone that creates a vortex and reveals Pao's ship. Pao is trapped and low on oxygen, but he manages to contact them. He explains that he sent the message to reunite with Meifa before his death. However, Jet begins to criticize Pao for manipulating them with Feng Shui, but Pao acknowledges Jet's point and apologizes to Meifa. Meifa forgives Pao, expressing relief at seeing him again. A good enough closure, although it wouldn't hurt to show them a little more. The vortex collapses, which cuts off Pao's transmission and leaves him to die. Later, Jet notes that Meifa returned to Mars, and life on the Bebop resumed as usual, except he no longer believes in horoscopes. The Bebop crew tracks a bounty named Teddy Bomber, a terrorist who is commonly known for planting bombs inside teddy bears, a lovable surprise for the annoying kids. Spike apprehends him by pulling the pin out of one bear, but as Teddy tries to explain his motives, Andy, another bounty hunter, arrives with his horse through the window. He mistakes Spike for the terrorist. And now the show lives up to its name, cowboys on horses on the hunt for bounties. Spike tells him to stop, but Andy ropes him, which allows Teddy to escape and detonate more bombs. Andy realizes his mistake, but it's too late and rides off, leaving Spike injured and humiliated. He manages to return to the Bebop and tells the situation to everyone, but the crew is skeptical. Ed pulls up Andy's profile, revealing him to be Andy Vonde Oniate, a wealthy heir with an interest in bounty hunting who is quite similar to Spike in appearance and behavior. The crew tries to capture Teddy Bomber at a masquerade party. Jet dresses as a hippie, Spike is in a mask, and Faye, as a socialite, spots Teddy in a giant teddy bear costume. Just as they're about to capture him, Andy quite literally horses around, which causes a commotion in the party. Teddy detonates explosive out of frustration and escapes. Spike and Andy chase him down but end up in a vehicular brawl as they ignore Teddy. Andy brings Faye to his boat and prepares his infamous son-of-a-gun stew. Faye notes his poor taste in decor and his inflated ego, which obviously reminds her of Spike. She returns to the Bebop with the stew and shares her observation of Andy and Spike's similarities, which enrages Spike. Suddenly, Big Shot interrupts their conversation, announcing Teddy's bounty and hinting at his next target, City Hall. Some theories suggest Teddy Bomber as an inside agent of the government as they know his moves, but it was never confirmed. And again, something that sounds familiar from the real world. Jet and Faye are reluctant to chase Teddy, but Spike, driven by his rivalry with Andy, insists. At City Hall, Teddy waits at a water fountain. Spike arrives, but he's more focused on Andy's whereabouts. Andy soon shows up, and they immediately begin to argue with each other as they ignore Teddy. As an attention seeker, Teddy has no other choice but to detonate a bomb. He leads them into an elevator trap, but they manage to escape in the nick of time by fighting through the top of the elevator. The elevator explodes, and Spike and Andy race to the top of the building. They engage in a duel until they run out of bullets and face off hand to hand. Spike punches a desk, causing Andy to nearly fall off the ledge. Andy admits defeat, gives Spike his hat, and rides off on his horse. In a police wagon, Teddy Bomber finally explains his motive, protesting capitalism's wastefulness. Finally, a villain with a good cause. The policeman listens until Andy, in a samurai outfit, appears near the wagon. The Bebop crew is dealing with a new group called Scratch, led by Dr. Londes, who teaches that humanity's destiny is to leave their bodies and join an infinite sea of electrons. Spike watches a news profile on Scratch, and some interviews of scientists suggest that Dr. Londes is untrustworthy, as they dismiss his experiments as science fiction movie-esque. Spike also sees Faye on a talk show where she claims that she joined Scratch to escape her debts, since without a body, she would not need money. Spike tells Jet about Faye joining the cult, and they look into the matter. They discover that Dr. Londes has a bounty of a whopping 38 million oolongs for murder, and around 100 of Scratch's 20,000 followers have committed suicides. The cult Scratch takes inspiration from a real-life cult called Heaven's Gate. It was also known for the mass nerfing in 1997. Meanwhile, Faye is not actually a cult member. She becomes selfish enough to join Londes' cult and claim the bounty alone. She finds a creepy room with dead bodies and lots of TV screens. Suddenly, the screens turn on, and Faye senses danger. She tries to escape, but eventually becomes disoriented. Edward attempts to hack into Londes' whereabouts. Jet interviews Londes' old colleagues. And Spike talks to Scratch recruiters, but they find nothing. Scratch members insist Londes has left his physical form. Even Big Shot, the bounty hunter show, has no new information and is heading toward decline due to low viewership. They regroup on the Bebop when Faye contacts them, and she sounds confused as she talks about clearing all of her debts before the call cuts. Jet orders Spike to find Faye while he buys a brain dream device to locate Londes' location. He accesses the Scratch website through the device, but fails to dive deeper without joining the group. Edward creates a fake identity with a totally unsuspicious name, Marshall Banana, for Jet to get further into the site. The website shows a video of Londes explaining Scratch's beliefs. Ein starts barking at the video, and suddenly Jet begins to fall unconscious. Ein bites him to snap him out of his sleep, and he realizes the Scratch program uses a high-frequency pulse to paralyze the nervous system. Ed and Jet stay determined to use the website to find Londes, and this time they use Ein as the test subject. Ein takes over with a fake identity named Gina Sanbodi and navigates the site. They discover quite interesting news. Dr. Londes is not a real personality, and all of his information is fabricated. So this is how far schizophrenia can get you. They finally get a lead, and they reach Alice Valley Hospice on Mars. Jet and Ed go there disguised as father and daughter and roleplay their way inside. Meanwhile, Spike finds Faye unconscious in the same room she was in before. The TVs turn on, and the not-so-real Dr. Londes' voice tells that he put Faye into a deep sleep to distract bounty hunters. Spike demands that Londes show himself, but the voice reveals that he is just a character created to control people, but he doesn't reveal who made him in the first place. Londes claims that television is a religion and can control people, which makes Spike tired. If you look at the effects of social media in our society today, you can see that the show was way ahead of its time. Spike starts shooting the TVs and learns that Dr. Londes is just a kid with a toy. At the hospice, Ed and Jet find a young boy on life support controlling Londes' voice in the program. Ed decides to shut it down while Jet turns on a screen to show Spike. Londes argues with Spike about controlling people, but when Ed shuts down the system, Londes panics and reveals his real personality, Rosny Spangen. He is a young hacker in a vegetative state due to a medical accident 2 years ago, and Jet arrests Spangen's body. Faye wakes up beside Spike while she is confused about where she is. Jet and Ed decide not to turn Spangen in. Jet explains that since Spangen could only dream, his dreams turn dark. Edward wishes Spangen sweet dreams as they leave the hospice. In this episode, the Bebop crew tackles a bizarre cult, revealing how technology and manipulation can blend into a dangerous mix. They manage to uncover the truth, save Faye, and ensure that a troubled young mind is no longer able to harm others. As the Bebop travels through hyperspace on its way to Mars, Faye sits quietly and watches her old Betamax tape. The footage reminds her of the memories of her past, and she searches for clues that might lead her to more memories from her former life. While she's absorbed in her thoughts, Ed appears beside her as she watches the tape with her. Faye asks if Ed recognizes any locations from the video, but before long, Ed quickly falls asleep before revealing any details. Faye remains determined and blows air into Ed's mouth to wake her up. The next morning, the Bebop finds itself on Earth instead of Mars, causing Jet to panic about losing time and missing out on a bounty. Spike remains cool and treats it like a normal day as he brushes his teeth and calmly points out that the girls are gone. He believes that Ed has valuable information, and Faye secures her to the top of the ship, promising a reward if she helps her in the quest to retrieve her memories. They land near a massive landfill, and as they dig through the garbage, they are surrounded by a group of young children. Sister Clara, a nun, turns a hose on Faye since she mistakes her for a threat until she recognizes Ed. Clara takes them to an old orphanage and reveals that Ed stayed there for a few years. Later, they eat a meal, and Clara shows Ed a hologram of her father, who recently visited looking for her. Ed reacts with her usual hyperactivity and reveals her desire to reunite with her father. Meanwhile, Faye is determined to uncover more about her past. She finds a familiar landmark and meets Sally Young, a friend from her school days. Since decades have passed, Sally is now in a wheelchair but still recognizes Faye. Sally explains that Faye was put into cryostasis after a space shuttle accident. Faye struggles to remember, and when Sally's granddaughter appears, Faye decides to leave as she is overwhelmed by her incomplete memories. Returning to the Bebop, Faye is visibly saddened and ignores everyone as she directly retreats to her bed. Ein seems intrigued by the hologram of Ed's father. Jet and Spike receives news of a nearby bounty head, Apple Deli, who surprisingly turns out to be Ed's father with a supposed 50 million wulong bounty for a bank robbery. Now that surely is a lovable bond between a dad and daughter. Apple Deli and his assistant McIntyre currently travel to Earth in a rover and map the constantly changing terrain due to meteor strikes. Apple Deli often mispronounces McIntyre's name, which adds the spice of comedy in their conversation. Faye continues her search and remembers more about her past life. After she gets out of the shower with newfound determination, she accidentally bumps into Spike. He remains surprised by her sudden vulnerability and berates her. However, he is taken aback when she uncharacteristically apologizes to him with eyes that show deep emotion. Faye tells Ed that she has someone waiting for her and encourages Ed to find her own place of belonging, saying, "Belonging is the very best thing there is." Ed contemplates this as Faye flies away in the red tail. Spike and Jet locate Apple Deli near an inland lake and hold him at gunpoint. Apple Deli explains his mission to map Earth's ever-changing terrain, but Jet and Spike point out how pointless his mission is. Apple Deli defends himself by throwing some eggs toward them and gums up their pistols. When it comes to hand, he blocks Spike's attacks. Suddenly, Ed uses her remote control to control the Bebop, and it crashes ashore. The uselessness of her remote control should be studied. Apple Deli recognizes Ed and calls her Francois as they share a joyous reunion. He thanks the Bebop crew for looking after his child and rewards them with a basket of eggs. Jet checks the bounty again and realizes it is only 50 wulongs and not actually legit. Apple Deli invites Ed to join him, but another meteor strike forces him and McIntyre to rush off. Faye arrives at a steep path and has a flashback of her childhood where she remembers running towards her home in the space shuttle accident she survived. She finds the foundation of her former home, the only thing left standing, and reflects on her lost past. Back on the Bebop, Ed gives Spike a pinwheel which symbolizes her farewell. Later, Ed and Ein leave the Bebop together. Jet cooks all of Apple Deli's eggs for dinner, but when he calls out, he finds the lounge empty. He discovers Spike smoking and looking contemplatively at the landing deck, where Ed's goodbye message is painted. A simple bye-bye accompanied by her signature hacking smiley. Ed and Ein walk off into the sunset, with meteors flashing overhead. Ed tells Ein she's going far away, but then invites him to join her. They run off together, leaving the Bebop behind. Ed's pinwheel, taped to the ship's upper deck, spins slowly as the light fades. On Mars, Julia returns to her apartment and listens to a message that warns her that the Red Dragon Crime Syndicate elders are making their move against her. Somewhere else, Vicious leads a team into the van's chamber, a trap. The light shines and the Red Dragon elders' reinforcements hold the high ground as they confront Vicious. They reveal they knew about Vicious's betrayal thanks to a crazy fortune teller, and instead of killing him outright, they capture him as they intend to break his spirit first. Meanwhile, Spike and Jet drown their sorrows at Loser Bar after losing 3 of their crew members. They notice a group of men rapidly approaching the establishment. They avoid an assassination attempt as gunfire tears the bar apart. Spike recognizes the assassins as Red Dragon members, assisted by Shin, Lin's brother, who was working with Vicious to overthrow the elders. Shin reveals that Vicious has been captured and the elders have decided to kill anyone associated with him, which includes Spike and Julia. Spike drags Jet out of the bar and heads to a local clinic where a doctor removes bullets from Jet's leg. In a flashback, Spike, at his last job with the Red Dragon, tells Julia that he plans to leave the syndicate. She warned him that the Red Dragon would kill him for it, but he had a plan to fake his death. He gave her a note and asked her to meet him at the graveyard after the job. Graveyard for a confession, how convenient. She was hesitant, but Spike assured her that they could start a new life. Julia drives on a highway and has a flashback of her own. Vicious had discovered her plan to leave and held a gun to her head. He told her to kill Spike or they would both be killed, and Julia tore up the note from Spike as she remained true to the syndicate. Back in the present, Faye waits at the Mars airport and she watches an old woman reunite with her son, Alfredo, the former co-host of Big Shot. She gets on her ship and receives a call from Spike. He tells her to meet him at Tharsis as he tells her about Jet's poor condition. However, she refuses and tells Spike that he takes too much for granted. She ends the call and thinks that Ed and Ein can take care of Jet. Meanwhile, Julia continues to drive while the Red Dragon chases her. Faye recognizes her and shoots out the tires of the car that follows her. Julia stops briefly in front of Faye and she jumps into the back of Julia's car to cover her, an absolute badass. Faye shoots out the tires of another Red Dragon car and they manage to get away. Julia thanks Faye for her help, only to learn that she is a bounty hunter. Julia asks if she can help her find Spike, and she suspects that she's the same Julia Spike knows. After she drops Faye at the airport, Julia reveals her identity and asks her to tell Spike to come to the place. On the Bebop, Jet wakes up with his leg bandaged. Spike has set the ship on a course for Tharsis. Jet arrives in the cockpit and tells him a story about how men only look to the past when they are about to die. He urges Spike to stay away from Tharsis and Julia, but Spike cannot abandon her. She was the first woman who made him feel whole. Faye returns to the Bebop in the Red Tail. Jet thinks that she only has returned to get repairs for her ship, and he yells at her. She shushes him off and passes on Julia's message to Spike. As she goes to find him, Jet takes a call from Bob, who informs him about the Red Dragon's internal strife and the failure of Vicious. Bob says that the elders will kill anyone associated with Vicious, but Jet knows it's already too late. As Faye tries to pass the message, the Bebop is attacked. Spike gets into the swordfish too, and Faye follows in a red tail. She manages to deliver the message as he gets ready to leave. He heads out without responding and attacks the ships to defend the Bebop with Faye's help. However, the Bebop is still damaged after the threat is erased. Jet tells Spike not to worry about the ship and to go find Julia. Meanwhile, at the Red Dragon headquarters, the elders prepare to execute Vicious. As the executors prepare, Vicious's bird arrives and drops smoke bombs to create a distraction. Some of the Red Dragon soldiers remain loyal to Vicious and turn on the elders, and they free Vicious from his execution. Vicious kills the last elder with his sword as he declares himself the only power that matters in the Red Dragon. Meanwhile, Spike arrives at the graveyard to find Julia waiting for him. However, before he can say anything, she draws a gun and aims it at him. As Spike and Julia reunite after 3 long years, the weight of their past and the unknown future is filled in the air. Julia keeps a gun in her hand and reveals the truth of her past, where she was forced to kill Spike. But she decided to keep herself away from him, since she loved him to death. Their union is a mixture of love and hatred as they think about running away together once again, but successfully this time. Meanwhile, at the heart of the Red Dragon crime syndicate, Vicious makes his move as he prepares a deadly ambush on the elders. With Vicious in control and his power abuse, the syndicate turns into chaos. As the dust settles, Vicious's quest to become the leader of the syndicate drives him to locate Julia's whereabouts. He understands that her bond with Spike is either dangerous or advantageous, but no in-betweens. Back on the Bebop, Faye and Jet remain concerned about Spike's fate with Julia, since she is a certified red flag. Faye expresses a mixture of frustration and worry about Spike's recklessness, while she struggles to get a grip on her newfound emotions after learning she cannot regain her memories properly. Jet tries to temper Faye's concerns while he struggles with his own doubts about their ability to intervene in Spike's journey. Faye becomes vulnerable and shares her impression of Julia with Jet as she offers him the complexity of her character, predicting something bad is about to happen soon. She describes Julia's dual nature as both angelic and devilish and reflects the emotions that surround her role in Spike's life. Faye's words serve as a reminder of the relationships and emotions that keep the Bebop crew together. Meanwhile, Spike and Julia's reunion takes a tragic turn when they visit Annie's store, where they find her gravely wounded. Annie tells them of the danger that lurks in their world as she reveals the assassination of the Red Dragon elders has escalated the conflict between rival factions within the syndicate, stirring up the tensions by a large margin. However, they find out that the shop is surrounded by the Red Dragon agents, and Spike prepares for the fight. After a few minutes of running around the shop, when they finally leave the building, an agent arrives from behind and shoots Julia. Spike returns, fires the agent, and holds Julia in his arms. She mutters her final sentence and dies. Spike continues to hold her, and his tears are mixed with the rain as he looks up with rage in his eyes. Meanwhile, Jet finds Laughing Bull to find Spike's location. Laughing Bull tells Jet that when someone is born, a new guardian star is also formed, and when someone dies, a guardian star fades away. Suddenly, Laughing Bull shares his thought that Spike's guardian star is about to fade away and tells Jet not to fear death as it will guide them to infinity. Spike struggles to accept the fact that his past has almost caught up with him and will eat him up directly from the inside. As Spike prepares to confront his arch-nemesis, Vicious, Faye returns to the Bebop with a heavy heart as she feels that she may never see Spike again. In a moment of self-thought, Spike shares a heart-touching story with Jet, where he reflects on his nature of life and love. His words carry the weight of his own experiences that hint at the depth of his feelings for Julia and how the ghosts of his past still haunt him. After a conversation with Faye, Spike embarks on his final mission as the tension reaches its breaking point, and Faye tears up as she feels something unfortunate is coming. Spike remembers his time with Julia in the past and how she made him feel alive and loved. The battle is the peak of emotions and symbolism as Spike and Vicious face off in a duel to the death. Their clash of ideologies showed a timeless struggle between light and darkness, love and hatred. In the room. The room explodes, destroying almost everything, and Vicious reminds Spike that he is the only person who can kill and set him free from his past. Spike coldly tells him that Julia has passed away, and he has nothing to lose now. The fight continues until Spike shoots Vicious in the chest, and Vicious slashes across Spike's abdomen. Ultimately, Vicious finally dies with a bullet wound in his chest. In the end, as Spike lies mortally wounded, his gaze fixed on the heavens above, he finds solace in the knowledge that he has finally confronted his demons and made peace with his past. He limps down the stairs and finds some members of the syndicate who are shocked to see him. Spike smiles and utters bang as he points his pointer finger toward them, mimicking a gun, and lifelessly falls to the ground. And on this note, this wild ride of the Bebop crew comes to an end. Or does it? Laughing Bull was right. Spike's death was led to him by a woman, but the interesting thing is, some say Spike is still alive. How? Laughing Bull mentions about a star fading if someone dies. And in the post-credit scene, there are 2 stars in space, but only one of them fades. Vicious's death was confirmed, so it might be possible it was his star and not Spike's. This theory gains even more credibility from the series director himself, who admitted in an interview that he doesn't know what happened to Spike in the end himself. Well, thanks for sticking till the end, and let us know in the comments what was your favorite moment in the series. And if you enjoyed it, drop us a like and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more amazing shows like this recapped on your feed. And we'll see you in the next one.